there's obviously a kind of initial assessment with a social worker who's been assigned to your record, which is quite a lengthy, I'd say, initial interview about you, your life, your family experiences. It's really very broad, your work. There's also an initial, let's say, visit of the home to see if it's suitable. If there is a room, space, everything else, a kind of initial assessment, which in my case was of course a virtual visit, because this was last spring, early summer, so we couldn't do any home visits, but we did it virtually. And so there is that side of thing where the social worker is really just doing an initial assessment of whether you are a viable candidate. And then the next phase is more, I'd say, academic, because it's really about doing basic checks. So criminal record check, a medical check, employer check, previous experience. So it's more admin based, I would say. And so in my case, that's what actually took longer, but purely because of the circumstances of last year, that a lot of those services were taking a longer time to respond than they would normally. But there is that admin phase. So that's, I suppose, the equivalent of stage one, really. If you've passed all of that, you move on to a series of interviews with people who you have nominated as references, and so you try and have, I'd say, a reasonably broad and varied selection of people. So people who have known you for different lengths of time, short and long. If possible, people who've perhaps known you at different periods of your life, whether that's through childhood or through adulthood. Of course, it depends on the candidate. I mean, some people may not be able to go back that far in terms of who they still have in their life as friends or family. And of course, whether you actually grew up in this country. If your family's abroad, then that's more awkward. But you go through these series of interviews which are done, and this is really to build up a dossier, I'd say a report about you as a candidate. And so it covers every aspect of your life through the eyes of people who have known you at different stages in your life, close friends and family, but also perhaps colleagues or ex-colleagues. In my case, I had an old university friend who is still a very good friend now, and so has known me for about 20 years. So it really varies. In parallel to that, so at the same time as these interviews are happening, then there are also numerous sessions. I wouldn't say interviews, because it's more like a conversation with the assessment social worker, and they go through every aspect of your life and relationships that you have had with family or friends or work, your experience of being with children, whether that's your own children or perhaps family or friends or through work. Again, as I say, because of the circumstances of last year, all of these sessions were done over the phone or video, whereas of course under normal circumstances there would have been a certain number of those which would have been done in person. Here it was slightly different, but I'd say that in total there's probably 8 to 10 of these sessions, which can be quite lengthy. And I think that probably goes back to what I was saying at the beginning, that you also have to, when you decide to start, I suppose you also have to be aware of the time that needs to be dedicated to the actual application process itself. You know, to be aware of the fact that there will be multiple meetings, talks, conversations, and so that also, I suppose, takes time. and then in parallel there may be forms to complete or questionnaires or various bits of information to provide or documents. And so once you've gone through all of those stages, the caseworker is then the person who's pulling all of this information together to create a report that will be sent to the fostering panel once you have a date for your panel of when you'll be assessed. They have a certain amount of time to go through this dossier on you, the assessment report. Occasionally come back with any questions. Sometimes they may keep their questions for the actual day of the panel. When you're in front of the panel, you do also have the assessment worker with you, the person who went through the process with you, and they may have questions on the report or not. And generally, or certainly in my case, and I think that this is general for other panels as well, you then have on the same day at least the initial findings of the panel. So whether they're recommending that you be approved or not, you would generally have at least their comments as feedback that same day. The case then your application then goes in front of the head of service, who will be the final person to ratify that decision. My understanding is that generally it's unusual that the head of service wouldn't follow the recommendation of the panel, and that was the case for me. The panel recommended that it be approved, but then it was ratified and approved.